You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today, it's a special, a bit different podcast for us, but there's been so much political talk. I wanted to have two people on the podcast who actually know what the heck they're talking about. The top of that list is Kayla Dwyer. She is a reporter at the Indianapolis Star covering state government and politics. She's also covered transportation. She came to the Indy Star in 2021. She is from the state that's going to decide it all, in my view, Pennsylvania. She's from right outside Philadelphia. And the other guest is someone I haven't talked to in forever, one of my favorites, who wrote me this very specific bio. So Tilo, I'm going to read this word for word because I don't want to get it wrong. Let me see here. And I have to say, it's really good to see you, Tom. It's been a long time.
I enjoy the Friends apartment backdrop.
Seinfeld.
Oh, God.
Ooh.
Fake news. It's been too long since the 90s.
Are you actually a millennial?
Am I, though? I'm an exennial.
That's all right. When I call you Eric Bradner here in a minute, we'll be even. Tom LoBianco is a veteran national political reporter covering his third race for the White House. He is the founder of 24 Site News. He is an award-winning author of the Mike Pence biography, Mike Pence and the Taking of the White House. I would not talk to him with that. I am not a source. Or for Piety and Power. I didn't talk to him then either, despite many efforts. Right, Tilo?
This is our first time talking. I have no idea who you are.
In more than 2 decades of covering politics and government, he has reported from county council meetings to state houses, Congress, the White House, and crisscrossed the country on the campaign trail for CNN, the Associated Press, the Indianapolis Star, and more. He is a regular guest on cable, radio, streaming, YouTube, and fine podcasts like the one you are listening to right now. You are witness to Tom's career peak. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
And I'll see you later. Now that I peaked, just like Costanza.
That's right. Can I walk out of the room on a high note?
That's right, baby.
So it's, as we said here before we got started, it's insane. It's unlike, and by it, the political process, the presidential campaigns. It's crazy. It's unpredictable. It can be demeaning, disappointing, and in Trump's case, almost deadly. How do we make sense out of what we're about to experience over the next 3 months, Kayla?
Wait, sorry. I'm on the State House Wi-Fi and you clipped out the last 10 seconds. Can you just repeat the last? I'm so sorry.
No apologies. I'll start all over.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There are many words for it. You could call it insanity. You can call it disappointing. You could call it, in Donald Trump's case, almost deadly. It can be historic in its own way, frustrating. The list goes on and on. But the coming political season, which traditionally kicks off Labor Day weekend, to decide the next president is unlike any other we've experienced. And I believe that. Kayla, how do we make sense of it?
How do we make sense of one of the most historic elections in my lifetime?
How do we make sense of the insanity? How do we make sense of how the hell did we get to the point where we are in a country of 340 million Americans?
In many ways, this is probably the most difficult time ever to answer that question, because everyone is there's no communicating across the aisle on various mediums. The messaging on the D side, the messaging on the R side is completely siloed. And I don't even know, besides hopefully most of the media, I don't even know who's standing in the middle of all that, trying to distill into some sort of through line. It's really hard to answer that question.
Kind of sucks to be on the other side, doesn't it, Kayla?
No,
Tough to
I
answer
don't like
that question.
I'd like to phone a friend.
Leaders and legends and Vane's revenge.
How do we make sense of the insanity?
You look back in our history, and we've had terrible presidents, obviously. We've had phenomenal presidents. And it has seemed to be in our history when the country has needed a strong president, a good man, since it's only been men so far, the country has produced it. Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Reagan, the list goes on and on. Where are those people these days, Tom?
Boy, I thought you were supposed to give her the tough question.
I came up with an answer, by the way, during this silence.
Oh, boy. All right. Damn, Vane, I knew I shouldn't have agreed to this. Okay. Where are they? I like how you stopped the so on and so on at Reagan. That seems like the right amount of historical space so that we're not bumping up against the raw political reality of this.
Presidential historians consistently put him in the top 10. The presidents who come after him don't necessarily make it. Depends on the poll and the historians, but let's just stop there.
Not sure if old big dog, Slick Willie, upped his standings or dropped him with that convention appearance last week. There's a couple things here. I think if you look back on the primary process that we're going through, and so much of this is rooted in primary politics. It's this tandem of technology and the constant flood of information, and to that degree, really misinformation, also with the partisan design of political primaries, which has given us, generally speaking, extreme candidates who don't always win with majorities. Trump never won with majorities. Actually, let me take that back. He won this time, but that wasn't really a primary. That was a non-existent one.
Hell, it was the election of the Pope compared to what the Democrats did.
And that, see, you just jumped the gun on this long-winded, beautiful oratory I was working on here. Okay. I think that's really what it takes to get somebody back close to the middle. And however the parties define something close to centrist these days. If you look at Biden in 2020, really Bernie Sanders coming out of that election had a pretty good chance of locking that in. If I remember back in March of 2020, pitching folks on convention chaos stories before the lockdowns, because there was a moment where this looked like it could go to a convention battle at the DNC. And it's whoever, again, it was very much a repeat of Trump in 2016. There's a strong plurality with a very wide open field. Now, what they did was, I think this is very emblematic of what the parties are, the Republican Party versus Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, as we saw with Vice President Kamala Harris there, the Democratic Party really still has the infrastructure of a party and those party leaders, elders, power brokers who can determine and shape things within a party process. And that's really what happened. That's why we're old enough to remember when nobody knew how. Indiana Democrats did not know how to say Pete Buttigieg's name.
Correct.
And now we're here where he is transportation secretary, and he got that sweet spot in part because he was one of the first people to drop out and throw behind Biden.
Okay, let me ask you a question, because I think that Tom makes a great point. The Democratic Party, I'll be nice and say the Democratic Party, Kip too, if you're listening, and
okay,
they have a very strong leadership clique. And I say that as a compliment. Whereas the Republicans had something like that until Hurricane Trump came blowing through and literally razed it all to the ground. Do you think that's a fair assessment of where the national parties are on things like this?
I think relative, maybe I wouldn't phrase it that way, but yes, I was thinking of this point as Tom was talking in terms of explaining why there's not that quote unquote right person, particularly like on the R side, in your words, and also to the insanity of this election. I do think like the rise of populist politics has influenced a decline in the power and the influence of the party machine, which, of course, a big role of a party machine is candidate recruitment, right? And for better or worse, I think depending on your viewpoint, you might like that. The candidates are driven by what the people want, latching onto a personality like Trump versus the cigar-filled rooms or whatever that phrase is coming up with
Smoke-filled rooms.
The blue. Mm-hmm. Yeah, smoke-filled rooms.
The James K. Polk and James Garfield elections, where no one had ever heard of them.
Those are kind of the two extremes that we've seen in our history. Probably ideally you want somewhere in the middle, but right now we're on the other extreme.
Let me ask you a question that's pertinent to something that happened here in Indiana, and then I'm going to let you ask Tom some questions so that you guys can talk a little bit.
What
is it a microcosm? Oh yeah. Apparently, you have some unpaid bills here at the Indy Star.
Now hold on a second
to be settled. No, my question is very quickly is, you wrote about it, and I can't remember if you were there. I think you were. Is what happened at the Indiana Republican Party convention, where the governor's candidate for lieutenant governor was rejected by the delegates and someone else placed on the ticket. To you, is that a microcosm of what you just described nationally?
Yes. And I could talk about this for hours, but I won't. Yeah, that was a symptom of, and I think I can say this without hurting any feelings, but the establishment, if you will, being a little too sure of themselves in terms of the influence and power that they would wield over the delegates. When you walked into the convention on that day, I thought the race was 50-50 between this ultra-conservative pastor, Micah Beckwith, who had been traveling all across the state, speaking to rural voters everywhere, recruited a bunch of delegates to run, particularly where he's from in Hamilton County. Really is this far right, speaks to very socially conservative issues, but also running on an anti-establishment platform. I've always felt, because of some of those strains within the party, that this is going to be 50-50 toss-up for me. But up until the morning of that, even at the convention, folks within the party and within the Mike Braun campaign were very confident that, not very confident, but there was confidence that they had the numbers. It was going to be okay. But the energy in that room for Mr. Beckwith, compared to Mike Braun's endorsed candidate, Julie McGuire, who is a very new Indiana House member. Most people had to Google her name. People didn't really know her. The energy comparison was just astounding. And when that convention started, my scales tipped in favor of Beckwith pulling this off. I do think it's a microcosm. And some of those seeds were planted in 2022 when they picked Diego Morales over Holly Sullivan. And we all know that story. Holcomb's endorsed candidate for Secretary of State. So, yeah.
You are listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guests today are Kayla Dwyer, State House and politics reporter for the Indianapolis Star, and Tom LoBianco, former Hoosier and current maven of politics throughout the country, 24/7 News. It's really must listening or must reading. I read it today, your latest, and we want to make sure that we plug all of your stuff, Tilo, before we get off the podcast and make sure Kayla has a chance to talk about her political newsletter, which comes out, I believe, on Fridays, which is very good.
Nice.
Kayla, why don't you, I know you're, I hate to say stuck in Indiana, but your focus is on Indiana.
Is anyone ever stuck in Indiana? Come on now.
Depends.
Van, are you stuck in Indiana?
Sounds like he is.
I get to Scotland any chance I get. I put it that way. Kayla, ask if you, why don't you and Tom have some comments, some banter about what Tom's seen in his travels, because he's hitting these swing states. We're not a swing state, and that's what I meant. We're stuck in Indiana. It's not really, there may be a competitive race or two statewide. I doubt it. Yeah. But around us are states that could and may decide. Go ahead, Kayla.
Yeah. And Tom, I just want to say, I first of all read your book on Pence and I loved it. And I learned a lot. And also, there's no bad blood between Indy Star and you. Despite what I'm just kidding. It's all
because everybody who worked with him is gone.
Actually, true.
Yeah.
Nah, Tim Evans is still there.
Is it still located next to Auntie Anne's, the pretzels?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Oh,
see, then everything's fine. Everything's okay.
Everything's fine. Yeah, we're not going to get
a little butter on it
anytime soon. Let's see. And what I was going to say was I agreed to do this about 2 hours ago, and in those 2 hours, I was knee deep in Indiana road funding. I have not prepared a lick. I have not prepared a lick, but here we go. Did you go to both conventions?
I did, yes.
Did Indiana matter at all? Did anybody talk about Indiana? Are we just totally irrelevant on the national stage?
Here, obviously in 2016, it was so big for Indiana. And I can't remember. They might have even moved around the floor seating back then to move Indiana closer to the stage, because when Pence got picked, although that was very late in the process and that was very chaotic. Although worth noting, for this convention, it's a Hoosier who put it together for the RNC, Anne Hathaway.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. As they say, as Vonnegut would tell you, wherever you go, there's a Hoosier.
That's right.
That's right.
And Indiana's always had this, and I love it. Even despite the fact, I remember when I started at the AP back in 2011, and Jim Merritt came by the shack. And Jim Merritt, he's just the nicest guy in the world. And we're talking, he's saying, doing a little intro. And he says, he's asking me if I like football. I'm like, oh yeah, I like football. And he's like, you like the Colts? And I was like, oh, I love the Colts. My Colts. The one you stole. Now, I did not move to Indianapolis to retrieve my football team. We got a better one. We stole it too. As I recall, Norm Cox, who used to be over at Channel 6, was from Cleveland, and he would remind me of that routinely. I'm like, hey, look, man, it's tag lib, but I can't help you with that. All right, that's it. Indiana, I love, and I really miss the covering Indiana, and I'm sure you picked up on this. Is the power is so understated. Nobody really flashes it. It's a rare thing, and that's part of the reason why Mitch Daniels was so interesting as a Hoosier leader. He was very front facing as Indiana politicians go, and obviously he walked in with a big national profile and really built on that. But look at people like Mike Braun, for instance. Of course, now coming back to be governor, he had a fair amount of sway with Trump. He found a way in Washington to thread the needle. Todd Young has developed into a pillar in Washington. I would even make the argument. I saw that. I think it's the Lugar bust is going to be unveiled in a couple days. I look at it now. You look at what happened on January 6th, where he jumped on top of Susan Collins to protect her. And he has stood firm in his principles and beliefs. And it's, as reporters, it's not for us to say whether people should believe them, agree with that or not. but he has stood firm at a time when there's been an incredible amount of pressure on Republicans to not do that. And he's one of those people where the senators and lawmakers and whatnot who you'll see in Washington who will privately tell you their concerns, but will not publicly state them. He's really developed into a Luger character. And that's a big statement in Indiana politics.
Yeah.
As we know. And that's, I know I've had to do a wind up on that. I was thinking about it as I was talking there. I was like, God, really? Yeah, really. He has. The Democratic Party, obviously not so much, because it just doesn't pull the sway that it used to. And it's been decades now. What was it, 96, 2000? You used to have split chambers in the State House. And John Gregg.
2008. They controlled it in 2008. We didn't win it till 10.
Oh, interesting.
And there was a 2004, 2006 when Daniels won first, but then the Obama crater in 10, and then followed by the second one in 14, really solidified the supermajorities. So it wasn't that long ago that the Democrats had the House, I guess 14 years. And I know Kayla's worked on this, talked about this before. What did happen, and how do they get? I could care less if the Democratic Party becomes strong again in Indiana, other than the fact that I have some wonderful friends who adhere to that philosophy. But what did happen, and why isn't it happening nationally, where the Democrats appear to be district by district so strong? Other than the fact that we keep nominating horrific candidates and throw away Senate seats like they're tissue paper. We meaning the Republicans.
Kayla, right? Is that for Kayla?
Was that for me?
Kayla.
It doesn't matter.
That's for Kayla.
You mean what happened to allow Republicans to gain their supermajority, or the opposite, for Democrats to wither?
Meaning how the Democrats used to, in Indiana, control the governor's office, mayor of Indianapolis, as they do now, Indiana House, a majority of the U.S. congressional seats, a U.S. Senate seat, regularly held the office of Attorney General. They haven't won a statewide race since 2012 and have won only 4 statewide races since the advent of Mitch Daniels in 2004.
Yeah, I think a lot of this played out in southern Indiana. Used to be a lot of Democrats down there, conservative Democrats, when those used to exist. And I think the thing is they don't exist anymore. This is only one part of the story, of course, but the national shifts in the party alignments, I think, has impacted who consider themselves Republican and Democrat in Indiana. And demographically, those shifts combined with who is here, I think, has led to just the numbers game and an advantage for Republicans. Trump brought on a lot of working class Democrats who maybe don't love that the Democrats are now very pro-abortion. I think Trump scooped them up, and maybe a little bit of partisan map drawing, depending on whom you ask.
They wouldn't know anything about that.
It's amazing how many Republicans you get in the General Assembly when 88% of all countywide elected officials in Indiana are Republicans. I wonder how that works.
I think it's the combination of the demographics, the party alignment shifts, and a little bit of, because it is a partisan process, the way we draw our maps. So it's certainly not an independent process. The truth is always somewhere in the middle, is the praxim that I go by in my life.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I know that Republicans don't think that the maps are gerrymandered. Democrats blame their failures completely on gerrymandering. So to me, the truth is somewhere probably in the middle.
Let me ask a question to that, because we could certainly talk about gerrymandering, which I think is one of the great legacies of the revolutionary period in American history. For Elbridge Gerry.
That's right.
His district that looked like a salamander, so they called it gerrymander.
Yes.
He became vice president of the United States, so he came out of it okay. Yeah. Let me ask you this question, Tom, because you travel so much and you're such a student of politics. Famously, decades ago, Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. I had a conversation with a friend of mine whom you both know, I believe, Toby McClamrock, about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Toby says politics is so national these days, and he had a great theory as to why. And this was before social media, which has just accelerated the process. Is politics more national or is it more local, in your opinion?
Oh, definitely national. And I mean, you could even make an argument that in some ways it's becoming global. You look at the way Americans' political movements are starting to mirror some of these other political movements. You go to conservative events and you hear from the Prime Minister of Hungary these days. And you talk with former Republicans who are supporting Kamala Harris, and they talk about pro-democracy coalitions built in France. And again, that all has to do with communications technology and what we're talking on right now, which is handheld, ginormous supercomputers, which didn't exist back then. But it's funny because, and again, I think this is something that Trump's people got real good at. And it's, if you're good at it, you can exploit it. I love state conventions. I love going to state party conventions. And what happened in Indiana, as Kayla was just talking about, was a good example of all politics is local. Because Beckwith went out and did the work. And he was a well-known figure walking into it. You know, when I wrote the book about Pence, one of the things that Pence was always good at, and he's a throwback in a sense, even back then, walking into when he was looking at running in 08, or a lot of people were asking him to run for president in 08, I should say, after the McCain blowout. He has this meeting down in Northern Virginia with the Council for National Policy. And this is what we'd all call the movement conservatives, Christian rights, social conservatives, Brent Bozell, Kellyanne Conway, Mark Short, a lot of the old brass, which is still powerful, but not powerful the way they used to be back then. And it was so remarkable. And this is true of a lot of Pence anecdotes. His ability to walk into the room knowing everybody already. And that's when we talk in politics about good advance work. Sometimes they'll give you sheets where it's, okay, remember this. Okay, no, he's only got 2 kids. It's only 2. All right, boy and a girl. Come on now. All right. So you still have an element of that within the machinery, but so much of it, and I don't know, I'm wondering about this now, and we've seen this in the press. It's part of the reason things have gotten so shaken up even more than they already were. I kind of wonder how much Gen Z, as it starts to become a dominant force in American politics. The millennials are hitting their peak right now, demographically. That's why they played Little John at the roll call. And
Little John.
Little John. Vane, this is not for you. They skipped Gen X. Sorry, dude.
Really?
Again.
I tell you what, we had Prince, so you can have whoever you want.
Prince pretty good. That's pretty good.
We should notice it for the Micah Beckwith thing, though, to your point about local, and then I want you to finish, and then Kayla can continue the conversation with another question, that President Trump did endorse by name Julie McGuire, bronze choice, to be lieutenant governor, and Beckwith overcame that at a Republican state convention, which is as Trumpy can be.
That really is astounding. And a lot of that had to do with Trump's old director, who ended up leaving to go run for Congress himself, Brian Jack. Because Brian used to do a lot of that stuff for McCarthy in the U.S. House, and he was and then back with the Trump campaign before he started to run for Congress in his own right. He was very good at understanding districts. He was very good at one of Trump's superpowers has always been, as a very standard politician, is seeing where things are going and then catching the wave. So he's not a leading indicator; he's a lagging indicator. Boy, they really messed that one up. There's been a few of those recently. But I do wonder how much people are unplugging from all this. When you heard Obama in his speech say, as the Gen Z kids say, remember to touch grass, people are unplugging. They're unplugging from the constant news adrenaline hits. Even our news alerts don't hit as much as they used to. The news industry is adjusting to this. And I think you're starting to see people catch up with the technology in terms of understanding it. You could have a course correction back towards something like closer to Tip O'Neill was saying, more local, more retail, more showing up in person, potentially.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmond Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, and the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn. Our guests today, Kayla Dwyer, politics and state house reporter for the Indianapolis Star, and Tom LoBianco, founder of 24 Site News and a veteran political reporter, including a stop here in the Hoosier State. Kayla, you want to take over?
Sure. Just a quick note about the politics is national versus local. At first, I was thinking, I feel like there's a little bit of a mixed bag because the Micah Beckwith campaign that you brought up, he really was talking about local issues, local in terms of Indiana. He overstepped the line in COVID lockdowns, and he talked about property taxes. He talked about ag stuff. And yet then I have to catch myself and remind myself, he's courting in that race. He's courting the most motivated voters. He's courting the delegates. And I think it's true that among the general populace, politics is national. The ads that we saw in the governor's race, the TV ads, were all like border, crime, drugs. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And yeah, so I agree with you. I think these days a lot of politics is national. Speaking of which, there's a lot of hope and talk among local Dems about this Harris momentum and whether it'll help them down ballot. Do you think that's a realistic hope for Indiana Democrats?
Yeah, I think so. If you can get your foot soldiers to work around and show up and keep people excited. Don't forget when they talk about Black woman magic, the Divine Nine, Alpha Kappa Alpha, the fraternities and sororities, the HBCUs. This is the first time so much of that Democratic convention was targeted at them with special lines like Michelle Obama, get up, do the work. This is me, Michelle Obama, telling you, guess what? This is your call. That could potentially swing some borderline races. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, energy always works. I know everyone's been talking about how this is a honeymoon, how it's going to evaporate at some point. God bless Tony Fabrizio, who is in his polling is always very good. Now the spin he puts on it is a different question, but he's saying, "Oh, it's a honeymoon. It's a honeymoon." When does it stop being a honeymoon? It's been a honeymoon for 4 weeks now. Okay, I don't see it, and that energy in that hall last week was significant, and it's carrying online with these memes. So yeah, I think you could absolutely get some surprises. You can't really when you're doing the gerrymandering. I was looking at Pennsylvania. I was trying to understand the congressional districts, and I was looking at the current districts. And I was like, my God, these things are contiguous. How the hell did they do that? And then I looked at an old map, and they were not contiguous. That was like zigzags all over the place. I guess because the Supreme Court stepped in on it.
But in Indiana, to the extent, if you let's just say, for example, and I'll accept the premise of the Harris effect and not be a Republican flack for a second.
Oh,
let's say it's 5. I can do that later. Let's say it's 5%. Just argue that the D's are going to outperform 5% compared to previous elections. That did get them nothing statewide.
Right.
Maybe they can clip the supermajorities, but Banks wins in a walk.
Mm-hmm.
All the Rokita wins again. The gubernatorial ticket wins easily. Woody Myers is a good man, a damn good man, and a real Hoosier to be admired. He finished 3rd in 2020 in multiple states behind the Libertarian.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you went from winning 4 consecutive gubernatorial elections to finishing 3rd in multiple counties throughout Indiana. So
yeah.
In other states, however, could the Harris effect, let's say she wins by 5. Now, what are you talking about in terms of U.S. Senate and House of Representatives? Kayla?
Oh gosh.
Solid Democratic control, which means ends the filibuster and laws about restoring abortion rights and the border and
Yeah.
all their priorities.
Yeah. And Indiana, real quick, I definitely agree with your math there. Well, there's no agreeing. Math is the math. I think Democrats would count a win if McCormick performs better than people thought she would. And then because they would see that as like momentum for the next gubernatorial election. And maybe they flip one or two state house seats. Like that's something toward the pendulum swinging back into balance.
In your opinion, that let's move on. I want to be careful about asking your opinion because you're covering these races. So I don't want to put you in a bad spot. But the Democrats you're talking to, is that the spin? And I don't mean that pejoratively. Is that the spin they're putting on it? In 2024, if we do X, Y, and Z, then that's where we need to be for 2026 and 28.
Actually, that's more what I'm hearing privately. Yeah. The public spin, and not, again, yeah, spin, not the negative way of saying that. The public messaging is more like just focusing on what the light at the end of this year's tunnel. We can break the supermajority. There's not really public messaging to the effect of if we do this year, then maybe it'll get us this years down the road. That's just what I've gleaned from private conversations.
Okay, let's talk honeymoon since Tilo's going to make me earn my Republican bones. Maybe there wouldn't be such a honeymoon if Vice President Harris would give an interview. If the news media,
that is pretty remarkable.
If the news media wasn't such a Pavlovian dog when it comes to momentum for the D's, or Jonathan Karl's pathetic performance last week on his little political show. At a certain point, even, forgive me, the liberal media is going to have to take a stand against a candidate they clearly prefer and make her earn her bones in a presidential campaign.
Is the liberal media different from the mainstream media?
It is different than the identifiably conservative media like Fox. Yes, that is correct.
You know what's funny about that is you've always had elements of this. Really, look back at 2004 with John Kerry. You still have a lot of Democratic activists who say that it was the press that handed that race to W by amping the hell out of the Swift vote stuff. And a lot of activists on the left, a lot of longtime Democratic activists still blame the press for that. I mean, there's always been that tension.
Do they blame Dan Rather?
No.
Really? Because there's nothing says fairness like making fake documents with your Word program.
I wonder how much that was. What's his name? Roger Stone always likes to take credit for that one, but the rub on him is. The rub on him is that he often likes to take credit for things he had nothing to do with.
He's Nixonian, man. What do you expect?
But I mean, keeping
our thoughts on 2024, is that something where do you think that what kind of role, how big of a positive role can the media play in tipping the scales? They clearly hate Trump. Trump clearly hates them. We're not going to sugarcoat it. Do they have enough strength and enough reservoir of respect among consumers to make a difference?
I got to tell you, I'm not sure that at least not the beat reporters, I don't see a hatred of Trump at all. I think it's the other way around, because what I notice is that whatever Trump does gets attention. I've been watching 5 or 6 days of nonstop coverage of maybe he'll debate, maybe he won't, maybe they need the mics on, maybe they need the mics off. And look, I've been covering him for 10 years now. And that's the same do-si-do he's been doing with us for 10 years. And with God knows how long with the New York press. They know it better than anybody. And to me, that's not news. But people still write about it all the time, which I would argue is in his benefit, because it keeps him at the front, as they say, the earned media in the front line. And also, too, has that reflexive, internal reflex among a lot of conservatives and MAGA Republicans, which I should know is a distinct subset. There's a lot of It still creates that. I have seen, look, she has to do something. You're running for president. All right. And if you don't do something, and I think this is where it's incumbent on us how we handle it. Okay, don't do an interview. Fine. That it would be great to do an interview. And the power of that interview is predicated upon having her say something which then carries weight. And if you don't have that, we're going to go out and we're doing this anyway. We're going to look at who the transition team is, people who are lining up for the cabinet, previous statements from the stage in Chicago, good indicators of what the policy would be. Because fundamentally, that's what an interview comes down to, which is if you're going to vote on this person or that person, what are you voting for?
I tell my clients not from time to time, all the time, no one's a better spokesperson for you than you. And no one knows your opinions and the foundation of your philosophy and your choices better than you. And why not go out there and mix it up a little bit and show that you're not going to be cowed by reporters and the media. And I don't mean that like they're nefarious. I'm just saying Kamala Harris should stand in front of six and say, ask me any question you want, and I'm going to kick the living hell out of you with my answers because I know what the hell I'm talking about. Kayla, your perspective?
Yeah, I definitely think she needs to give interviews, and that's pretty, yeah. I do see, the mainstream outlets who some might consider liberal calling her out on that. Just today in the Times, there was some story about, here are the 24 questions we have for Harris, who has not given an interview yet. I think that's happening. I think there's so much. You pick a position that you're in and what you want to see the media doing, and you'll find it somewhere. The ecosystem is so large. The definition of the word media, I hate because I think it encompasses too many things. Local journalists, we're just trying to cover your school board. Or newspapers versus TV. TV has an entirely different set of priorities and motivations than maybe some print media do. The ecosystem is so large and complex. But one evergreen statement reality that I would make that I think applies to this conversation is a lot of conventional media outlets, corporate media outlets, are basically fighting for survival and in terms of revenue. And they are going to make coverage decisions based on that, not necessarily on what they find newsworthy personally. And I just think we all have to remember that and be educated news consumers. I think that's a big thing that's missing in our American society.
You are listening to Leaders and Legends. We're talking politics and the political media, something rare for us, but I've wanted to get Tom LoBianco on the podcast for a while. He's the founder of 24 Site News. And for some balance and a whole lot of smarts, I, at the last second, invited Kayla Dwyer, a politics and government reporter, State House reporter for the Indy Star. We're having a terrific conversation, and hopefully, at least my views are pretty well known. Everyone else's are somewhat in the dark. Let's talk debates. We have a few minutes left, and I hope that both of you will answer our 5 questions before the podcast ends. Let's talk debates. Debates, the famous example is 1960. But there have been other debates, Ford's gaffe in 76 about Poland not being under Soviet domination, Reagan's evisceration of Carter in 80, Dukakis's terrible performance where he basically didn't care if someone raped and murdered his wife, Kitty, or at least he came across that way. Debates have been hit or miss in terms of influencing voters, but they can play a role for sure, especially when someone outperforms, which I think Bush did in 2000. Based on expectations. Start with you, Kayla. What do you think is going to happen in the debates, assuming we have them in the 2024 election? And who do you think they will help?
I think we're not going to have the recreation of the Biden effect. I'm pretty sure we can say that for certain. I'm pretty sure they'll happen. Trump has hinted that he's amenable, and I think him backing out of that when the polling is so close and in Harris's favor would only hurt him. I think he has to debate her. What is going to happen from that? Listen, Kamala Harris is a prosecutor, a lawyer. She's probably a decent debater. I think it's going to test Trump's mental aptitude But I honestly think that people will make their decisions based on other things, based on their preconceived notions. I don't know that this will change people's minds. I think it'll just cement what people already think they're going to do.
What percentage, Kayla, if you had to guess, which I think is all we can do right now, and I'm going to ask you the same question, Tom, and then you can riff on the debates, is what percentage do you of the electorate? Of course, the most important, the dispositive part of the American electorate are the ones who don't vote. So putting them aside for just a second, because that's
what happens when you don't vote.
That's and it's a disgrace, quite frankly. Everyone who doesn't vote ought to go to Normandy and walk the cemetery. Anyway.
And that's a lot of people in Indiana. We have like the worst statistics.
No, and I have no sympathy for them.
Yeah.
If you ever watched the movie The Breakfast Club, remember Anthony Michael Hall, he has the fake ID so he could vote. Yeah, that was me in Irvington in 1984.
You committed voter fraud?
I would have if I could have figured out way. Everybody else is trying to get
Charlie
into
Way.
Yeah, I know. Everyone else is trying to get in the bars. I just want to vote there at IPS 85. Anyway, what percentage of the voting populace do you think is actually up for grabs, Kayla? Like truly undecided.
Oh.
And then Tom, you can go ahead and answer when she's finished.
Oh boy. Okay, let's think. Say that Trump has locked down, 35-40% of the Republican Party. Okay, divide by half. I'm going to guesstimate. Wait, if we're taking out people who don't vote. Oh gosh, it can't be more than like 10 to 20%. I don't know. I'm really bad at estimating.
You think it's single digits, Tom?
Oh yeah, it's real narrow. Definitely. Who else? I was talking with Justin Young on his podcast. We were talking about this a couple weeks ago when the campaigns finally start trying to moderate after Labor Day. It's going to be like The Purge, where every persuadable voter you can imagine running through the streets. It's like Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles and Anita Dunn and Stephanie Cutter chase them down.
What do you think the debates, not to necessarily counter Kayla's point, but the Vice President Harris does have a tendency to just string words together that don't quite make sense sometimes. And she's been criticized for that, although she does very well off a teleprompter, which you would expect. And Trump, of course, just says whatever the hell he wants. How do you think that's going to mesh in a debate in front of 100 million people?
I think that if she has debated before, we've seen her on the debate stage now in 2020. Well, we saw her in a number of, she's very good at creating moments. I remember throughout the campaign, she would always talk about her handling of Jeff Sessions back in 2017 at I think that was the Intelligence Committee, which I would also note, she steamrolled John McCain to do that back when he was still alive. And it was not as good as moment in the moment as it looked after you cut it up and put it in some campaign ads. But she's very good at cutting people off and steamrolling, which frankly is what you got to do with Trump. And Trump is a word salad. And I think this is why you're having that fight right now over whether the mics stay on or whether they stay off. Her favorite line, or one of her big lines, is "I'm speaking, I'm speaking," and I think it's very good. It works for her as a prosecutor. The ability to cut through somebody like a laser. Now, I don't know.
Women like it too.
What'd you say? Forgive me, Kayla?
I said women like it too from a feminist lens.
Sure. And to Tom's point about the audience for the convention, if part of your messaging is underserved, underrepresented, disrespected population, then yeah, being interrupted is a gift if you're on the debate stage. And Trump certainly would be more than willing to provide that gift.
I wonder how she's going to respond to his personal attacks. I haven't seen that yet. That's an X factor I'm wondering on right now.
But do you think that Trump has experience now? He's debated several times, including in the primaries back in the day in 2016. What strengths does he have, if any, on the debate stage? Tom?
he hasn't changed as a politician in the 10 years that I've seen him. He's gotten slower. He still behaves the same way that he always has. If anything, it's like watching Clinton up there, Bill Clinton, not Hillary. He lost his fastball a little bit, and I don't know if he can't get off a zinger in a good way. I don't know that it will work as well. He just doesn't have the pop that he used to. Now, that of course, that wasn't an issue when you had Biden up there on stage, slack-jawed, unable to say anything. I don't know how that works against Harris. But now the flip side of that is, and I don't mind saying it, it was racist, saying that he doesn't know whether she was Indian or black first. Then at the National Association of Black Journalists interview, and if he responds the same way that he did to Rachel Scott from ABC News, saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe that someone like you would ask me a question like this," I think that will blow up in his face. And the one thing that we have seen repeatedly, and this is how I think this is the best way to cover Trump, is to pull back out of the weeds and look at it in terms of nut graphs, as we say in journalism. Repeatedly, you get these promises of the polished campaign, the ability to control them. This is the third race in a row where we've had promises of teleprompter Trump. He's going to read the message. He's going to stay on message. No friggin' way the acceptance speech goes for 92 minutes. Guaranteed. Oh, and it's the last time he's ever going to talk about the assassination attempt. Won't ever do that with Elon Musk on X.com. This guy, he doesn't have any control over himself, and the campaign does not have any control over him.
Let me ask a question of Kayla. Two questions, actually. One is, do you think the assassination attempt, which was obviously real, there was a lot of, oh, it's a hoax and that sort of thing, which did a disservice to many people, but obviously was real. Do you think that will provide some benefit for Donald Trump? And if you got a call as soon as the Leaders and Legends podcast is finished here in another 10 minutes or so, 5 minutes, from Vice President Harris, what would be the first two questions you would ask her?
Okay. The first was, does the assassination help him? I have a hard time discerning whether the assassination helped him briefly or permanently, because it certainly was a huge, I don't know if energy boost is the right, he was like a Christ-like figure at the RNC because of that.
There was an adrenaline rush for sure.
Yeah. But is it being talked about that much anymore? I don't know. I almost think the adrenaline rush has passed now that Harris is the shiny new thing in this race. Just the mile-a-minute pace of this news cycle, I'm skeptical that it has a lasting impact. I think the people that are loyal to Trump are still loyal to Trump. And I think if there's people on the edges, they're not going to be swayed by that.
But if you think, point taken, but if you think that Trump is the anti-establishment angel you've been looking for your entire political life, and you have yet more evidence that the quote unquote deep state is against him because he got shot and people died at a political rally for Trump, does that either increase your energy to vote for him, which still only counts for one, right, or does it increase the number of people who decide to vote for him because they have started to believe in that message?
Weren't those people already going to vote though?
That's my exact question. Do you think does what happened in Pennsylvania make a difference in terms of broadening Trump's appeal and people saying 8 years ago, I didn't believe all that deep state stuff, but damn, Facebook really did collude with the Biden and Harris administration, and they really did shoot Donald Trump. Is that a broadening message or is it an intensifying message?
I think it's an intensifying message, but that's just one girl's opinion. What do you think, Tom?
I agree. Absolutely. This feels like a base election. I don't know. Absolutely.
My question's for Kamala Harris. Ooh, let's see. Okay. My big question for her, she's a very different candidate than she was in 2019. And I guess I just want her to explain to me that evolution, like which is the real Kamala Harris and which version of you was catering to the pressures of what people wanted to vote for. Which is the real one? What do you really believe of those two versions? But that's a pretty broad question. If that counts as number one, great.
Yes.
Number two, top of mind for a lot of undecided voters or people who were going to sit out and not vote for Biden, of course, is the war in Gaza. And I don't think she's really made her position clear. She's just said things that appease both sides. So would love to nail her on what exactly you think is required of this administration in that area.
Tilo, you get 2 questions for Vice President Harris.
Yeah. Oh boy, I was going to go with Israel Hamas. So that's a good one. Right on. Damn. Hell. Okay, let's see. Number one, I'd go with seeing as the Supreme Court granted these expansive powers for presidential immunity. That applies to every executive, every would-be executive. I would ask a couple basic questions I think you got to ask of anybody. Number one, will you abide by the results of the election? Number one. Two, actually, you know what? Ooh, here we go. Here we go. Will you pardon Donald Trump?
Ooh.
You got anyone else on the pardon list? Perhaps
Robert Thane.
Yeah, besides me. Yeah. Hunter Biden.
Oh.
These pardons are going to become more and more partisan, like so much of and I don't say that in a mean way. They're going to become more and more scrutinized. And they really have been since Ford's pardon of Nixon and since Clinton's pardon of Mark Rich in 2000 when he did that on the last days of the White House. Would you pardon Donald Trump? I'm not going to ask you, Kayla. I'll ask Tilo.
Oh, I can't say. That's as a journalist, that's not for me to say. I can tell you what I think the effects would be one way or the other. I think if a president were to get in there and pardon Trump, I think it would start to mend certain parts of the country. But there's a lot of people who experienced January 6th. I don't know about the rest of the stuff like classified documents and whatnot. January 6th still has to be addressed. I don't know that you can move past that one, because for everybody that you might get in the middle and the people that want to move past it, I think you'll enrage a lot of people who've lived it. And we saw a lot of them at the Democratic convention. There are a lot of administration officials, Trump administration officials. My God, Pence does, when he talked about it on your show, Rob, and he gave an answer. And it was a good answer as Pence goes. And you know him. He doesn't elucidate on things very much.
And I was more, I said on the podcast, January 6th has been trodden so much. To me, I was more interested in January 20th. Standing up there as a sitting vice president. From a historical perspective, you don't have that many presidents who skip inaugurations. John Quincy Adams did. John Adams did. I think there's more. I think there's one or two more. That just doesn't happen in our democracy.
I think it was interesting that you pointed him that way and he still came back to it. His family was there.
Yeah.
I know how I'd feel if my family was in there.
We've reached the point on the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions of all of our guests. Kayla Dwyer, are you ready?
I forgot to prepare my answers. So yeah, go off the cuff.
The only people who complain about not getting these questions ahead of time are journalists.
No,
I'm just going to tell you, Amanda Kingsbury, she complained. Rafael Sanchez, he said, why the hell didn't I get these questions? So
I know they're the same every time, and I just forgot to think about it. But so you're going to get my real reactions. So
for those of us who have been like, hey, Robert, you have 2 minutes? I got 17 questions to ask you here about the mayor. Let's have some fun. Kayla, what was your first job?
Do you mean like under the table as well, or like actual job?
Are there tax implications here?
She is a lot younger than us. Yeah, I guess so. Kayla, you answer that any way you want.
All right. I guess obviously I babysat and stuff like that when I was younger, but I guess my first real job was as a child swim instructor in high school.
Oh.
You're the one who taught sickage? Tilo, what was your first job?
Oh, I used to mow lawns to save up enough money to get a CD player.
Nice.
Kayla, what was your first concert?
For choir kids, so I went to all kinds of
Like
concerts,
the first one
for
where
school.
you bought a
Bought a
ticket.
ticket. I think it was Sarah Bareilles randomly.
Who?
She's a pop singer.
Tom, have you heard of her?
Who?
Sarah Bareilles. Come on.
Or Kayla.
Peak millennial.
Tom, what was your first concert?
Oh, probably the Black Crows 4, I think, out at Meriwether Post Pavilion.
Kayla, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
All right, because I forgot to prepare, I'm going to go with the book I just finished, which is, and actually it's pretty good for the moment. Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing. It's a reflection on today's attention economy and the ways that hurts us very severely. But she gives anecdotes from philosophers from all across antiquity, all of history, demonstrating the value of synchronous thought, not splintering your attention into these various mediums, but taking time to block out stuff, focus, like just what's happening to our brains in the way we're so fractured today. And I didn't describe that very eloquently, but it's a very good book and very informative.
Oh, it sounds superb, especially for those of us who pick up our phone when we should be doing something else.
Exactly.
Tilo?
After you get finished, the quite excellent Piety and Power, Mike Pence taking over the White House by yours truly.
I'm described as a moderate in that book.
Kayla, did I say that?
Yes.
Jesus, I got to issue an update.
Yeah, because I was sitting next to Governor Pence for the RFRA.
Yeah. Yeah, I should on a rewrite. I probably should have said squish.
You probably should have. You probably
proper terminology.
Menshevik, not Bolshevik. What's your book?
I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna go with 3, and I'll do it real fast. Yeah, number 1, Power Broker, Robert Caro. You got to read that to understand politics. All Caro books, it is a brick of a book, but you will have a brick of an understanding of how politics really works after reading that. 2, American Nations by Colin Woodard. It's like Woodward and Bernstein without the extra W, Woodard. I love that book. It is about the settlement patterns of the Europeans through the U.S. And man, he went through demographic, county by county tracts, demographics, and he nailed it to a T. He talks about how if you look at the cultural differences between Kokomo and everything north of Kokomo versus south of Kokomo, he just hits it incredibly. And I would say I'll just leave it there for those 2. Those 2 are good. Go read Robert Caro's book, Working. It talks about his reporting process and all the LBJ books. It's amazing. It's really good.
He's a historian who will be impossible to replace. Yes. For sure. Kayla, he took 2 books. We don't want the patriarchy here to rule Leaders and Legends.
That's right.
Would you like to have another book?
Sure. My other one, I think, would be Isabel Wilkerson's Warmth of Other Suns. It's about the Great Migration, and she follows multiple families. She tells the story narratively, but it's like full of historical. It's a history book, but it's told in a narrative fashion. So it's gripping, but also illuminating and pretty formative for our modern discussions about structural racism, wherever you sit with that.
You get 1, Tom. If you could witness one event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
Oh, Washington resigning his commission. The first peaceful transfer of power.
Wow.
Is that the tavern in New York City?
I still get chills.
Or when he did it?
It's actually, you can go to the spot in Annapolis, which I used to cover.
Okay. I was thinking of Fonz's Tavern in New York City down by the Battery where go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's the old Maryland State Senate. In the back of when you go to Annapolis, go down to the State House, and it's the back. The current chambers are towards the front, the House of the Senate, and then walk towards the back, and there's the original Senate chamber. And there's a statue of him there, and there's Martha up in the balcony watching as it happens. Yeah, still gives me chills. We are here because of it.
George III said, "If he does this, he will be the greatest man in the world." And he did it.
Yeah.
Kayla, any event in history, be there in person as it happens.
Might be a cliche answer for a journalist, but I would love to have just been in the newsroom during the unfolding of the Watergate reporting. There's so many lessons to learn about reporting, and I would be curious. They probably knew a lot more than they could report, and to be in on those like editorial conversations, and I think about that all the time. That would be really cool.
As a Watergate junkie, I can't argue how it unfolds, how they get to it is certainly fascinating. It's like one of the greatest detective novels ever.
Yeah.
Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose, Kayla, besides Mr. Peter?
For those listening, my soon husband, Peter Blanchard, who's now...
Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, I thought the question was alive or dead.
No, it's alive.
Uh-oh.
Boy. Ooh, I want to have dinner with Nancy Pelosi.
Well, that'd be a good one.
Because I felt she was holding back so much in that NPR interview recently. I felt just her role in encouraging, allegedly, and not nudging Biden to step aside. This could be the thing that altered the course of history. And I really just want, if the terms were such that she would be completely honest, yeah, I want to pick her brain.
Tom?
Mike Pence.
Of
He's
course.
a brilliant human. A lot of people don't see those layers, and he does not show them often. And I would throw away the phones, take away the staff. And he's a very smart man. And I'll tell you that he stood up when a lot of other Republicans could not or would not. And he continues to. He's very fascinating. Don't let the boring fool you. That's just a put on. There's layers to him. So I would love to have 2 hours actually off the record with Mike Pence.
And he's way, way up there when it comes to just being the kindest person you'd meet in politics. And it's not exactly a business full of kindness, but he's at the apex. Yes. You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, and the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Kayla Dwyer from the Indianapolis Star, please take a second and talk about your newsletter.
Why, yes. We actually rebranded it recently. It's called Checks and Balances. If you just Google Indy Star and Checks and Balances, you should be able to find the sign-up page. We brought back what some former print readers might love, behind closed doors. There's various sections in the newsletter, just basically going through what's happening at City Hall, under the dome of the State House, and even federally. So check that out. My Twitter account is at Kayla_Dwyer17.
Tom LoBianco, please talk to us about 24 Site News.
Head on over, folks, to 24site.news. It's the number 2424 SIGHT.news. It's me. I'm out there on my own, independent journalist, and write a daily newsletter of 24/7. Original coverage from the campaign trail, occasional podcasts with such future podcast, I hope, with such sharp individuals as Bain and Kayla, and various other things I find along the way. I'll tell you, everyone's talking about Pennsylvania, and everyone's all law versus Sheets. I did one of the last ones I dedicated to Rutter's. That is Rutter's erasure along 83, I-83 in the center of the state, which is some of my family lives up there in North Pennsylvania. See, that's what's up. 24.
And I stick with my prediction. Whoever wins Pennsylvania wins the presidency. Thank you both so much for coming on the podcast. I've never really done one like this. I had an absolute blast. I hope you did too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.